All right. Hey guys, I'm pretty sure this is recording. I'm going to try to make this super fast because last time I've tried to record this, it was like 18 minutes. So, this presentation is about my dad, Manuel Contreras. He was a Chicano advocate. He was an anti-gang advocate. He was a poet. He was a gang member and a very complex person and someone who represents my Chicano history very personally, obviously. And he wrote a book, and I want to tell you about it. His life, he grew up child number 8 of 14 kids to a single mother. So he grew up very poor. He grew up in a one-bedroom house, and that led him to be, in my opinion, very like a statistic. He dropped out at 8th grade because of his poverty, which led him down to follow his older brother's lifestyles, which was gangs and partying and crime. And he became a drug addict. My family is a notorious member because my oldest uncle, my brother, my dad's older brother murdered the founder of the Mexican mafia in the 70s, and my dad had to join the Nuestra Familia for protection. And because of that, my family became very notorious. And my dad then used his platform because of his notoriety um, as an anti-gang advocate. So this is also another picture of his book. He had his like prison friends do the art, and he wrote the poetry. There's a picture of my dad. That's his old PFN card, and that is a picture of him uh, being a drug advocate during the 80s. So my dad fell into poverty. Like I said, he joined the NF, and during a short time after his deal with the NF, he managed to get out of the gang, and he became a drug advocate at a local San Jose thing, organization called Stomp Out PCP. And he was very proud of himself during that time. He was sober and he did all the work. He was very passionate about it. He worked for free for 4 years, meeting with judges, counseling drug addicts, and trying to get them to have a better life. And PCP was a very bad popular drug in the 80s, also known as angel dust, and it was a big problem here in the Chicano world, in the Chicano community during the 80s. And so my dad was very passionate about it. He didn't stay sober that long. He stayed sober for about 4 years, and then he ended up relapsing and going back to prison in the early 90s or late 80s, early 90s, and where he wrote his book of poetry. So my dad was a breaker of stereotypes. Like I said, he was a gang member, he was a criminal, he was a mean person sometimes at his worst. And there he is in the local San Jose Mercury newspaper, which there are several articles about him that I have in a collection. Former drug addict, uh, becomes an anti-crusader, sorry. And this article is about him turning his life around and trying to work in this organization and really like being the face of this organization. I remember having old videos of him on the news. There were several articles about him, and he was extremely passionate about it. So literally he used his bad name, notorious name from being in prison, to using it as literally street credit, and being like, hey guys, like, I know I did this bad thing, but like, look at me now. You could do the same thing and turn your life around. And he was very passionate about doing that and spreading that message. This is a book of his. These are some of my favorite poems of his. He wrote a collection while he was in prison in the early 90s. And these are some of my favorite. They speak a lot about generational trauma. They speak a lot about regret, redemption, recovery, anti-gangs, community, Chicanoism, Chicano pride, and like the power and a lot of what we've learned about in this class. This specifically poem on the right, the bigger one, is literally about generational trauma before we had a word for it. Let me see if I can move. No, I can't. But oh, yes, I can. And it is a picture of my dad at the top, my brother on the bottom, and his son, all named Manuel. The little kid is Manuel the third, and it's literally about my dad's guilt, shame, regret about the choices he's made and how they affected my brother, who then also got into gangs and into drugs. And I think they went to prison together at some point. And my dad really like understanding the impact that his life choices had led and how much regret he had for that and how much fear he had for his grandson, who sadly also followed in those footsteps. And you know, my dad was really aware of his choices, of his situation, of his effect on the world. Sorry, I don't know how to move. Oh, there we go. We're just going to do that. And his effect on the world and his place and like how he could use his voice for good. And I think he really took that responsibility. He took it on as a responsibility, as and a form of redemption for himself and the things that he's done and my entire family has done, frankly. And I really grew up understanding the whole complexity of the Chicano community as that. I learned how to, and this is his contribution, not only for me, but like what he really tried to spread about everyone that he knew, was that just because, you know, we grew up poor or we grew up, you know, with the system against us, many of us have broken down and become those statistics that they tell us that we are stereotypically supposed to be. We are supposed to be gang members and drug addicts and menaces to society. And yet we can make those mistakes, and we can also change them and change them for our youth and become a community and to become stronger. And I think those are some of his strongest contributions, and something I've strongly learned from him and the people surrounding me with him. And I think he was just such a powerful voice. Locally, he still is. Like I said, he's been in newspapers. He wrote a book. He would send the poems to politicians, around to newspapers, around to anybody who would listen, frankly. And he would go out, and whenever he heard about like a cop shooting or like another youth dying in gangs, he would go out and he would drive to Oakland, to Stockton, to Richmond, and he would pass out his poems. When San Jose had their Cinco de Mayo parades, um, you know, before they were canceled, I literally was a kid going out and passing out poems with him. And that was one of the fond memories I had with my dad. And he was so passionate about it, about the community, about La Raza. And that's how I got to learn. And very proud of him. And I'm very proud of like his contribution to the culture. Thank you.